Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. William Scott White, an official scientist of the Midnight Society, has once again found his way into the darkness of the fox den to awaken me from my slumber. Absolutely delicious. I always do appreciate when you bring me something to feast on. Now that Mr. White has released me from my shackles, without further ado, once again, it's time to take a walk into the madness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out. Once again, you are tuning in to Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. William, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
Good to hear. Not too bad, my friend.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch. We've talked about it before, or at least in passing in some of our previous episodes. But I wanted this episode to be about the topic of feral people, and also potentially their connection to the crawler phenomenon that lots of people experience all over the country and even in other parts of the world. And when I'm saying feral people in this case, I'm not talking about like just some rednecks, hillbillies who don't come into town very often and might behave a little oddly compared to standard people. I'm talking about people who, one way or another, are totally separated from society and have been for generations. But as far as behavior, culture, and even the potential that a population left like that long enough living isolated or deliberately separated from the rest of humanity could actually have a divergent evolution. One of the common theories for national park disappearances, Smoky Mountain disappearances all over the country is that it's not UFOs, it's not portals. As much as I love the idea of portals, it's not Bigfoot, but in fact, it's these tribes of feral people who may inhabit the mountains or the woods, or I'm leaning towards a topic we've touched on before. They may have made the cave systems of the United States their home. And the reason, that this is theorized is because many people have reported seeing very wild looking, but very human looking individuals, raiding campsites, dumpsters at national parks, or people's homes, and behaving very oddly. Speaking, if they speak, it's not any sort of language that we would recognize. Some people say it sounds more animalistic, more grunting, more like that. And the idea is that it's possible that these feral people have existed in the United States from well before it was the United States. The Native Americans in various parts of the country have legends about wild men, and they're not necessarily talking about Bigfoot. And people, who live underground, moon-eyed people, um, and that ties into these experiences of the people in the parks reporting, somewhat negative interactions with strange people, strange humans who aren't necessarily wearing, modern clothes, might be more dressed in skins or mostly naked. It was the Cherokee actually who had a legend of the moon-eyed people that they went to war with. And the moon-eyed people were called that because they had very large eyes and very pale skin, and they did not come out in the day, because the sun was too bright for them. It blinded them. Well, as someone who's spent some time studying science and biology, that to me would speak of an evolutionary change, to their eyes to perhaps dwell in very low light conditions, like in caves. If you spend long enough in a cave, basically you have two options. There are cave fish that are blind. They have no eyes because they don't need eyes. There's no light where they live. So they survive with their other senses. That's one evolution, just go totally blind because it's a useless organ. The other evolution, if you're still existing in a world with some light, say more towards the cave mouth, and maybe venturing out at night into the, top world, um, that you would develop better eyesight, better night sight. And, large eyes, are better at collecting whatever light there is. It's the same concept with like a hunting scope. If you look at modern hunting scopes versus, say, hunting scopes from 50 or 60 years ago, you'll notice that the front tube at the very front of the scope is oftentimes, anywhere from 30 to 50 to 60 millimeters in diameter. It's very big, very noticeable, the difference between the part that's at the front that collects all the light versus the part that you're looking through with your eye, which might be 25 millimeters. And the reason for this is because a larger lens is able to capture more light and give you a much more clear image. And the same principle exists for our eyes, and so, I find that legend of these moon-eyed people that the Cherokee went to war with and possibly exterminated, very, very interesting from that perspective. That there was potentially a population of humans. They didn't say they weren't human. That was very divergent from, the appearance of modern humans, of the Native Americans, of really anyone that we know of on this planet. So, getting back to the feral people aspect, you know, I think we've got a couple options, and actually, that doesn't have to be only one of these options. The Smoky Mountains are huge. I mean, it's a vast, vast tract of land. This is an area where some of these sightings are most common. To me, it stands to reason that a group of people who do not want to make direct contact with modern people could very easily survive there, and in other similarly wilderness areas, um, without ever being caught, especially if no one's really looking for them. So that's option one, that there are groups of people living in the mountains and forests of North America. Um, and I think that's quite likely. Whether they're, like I said, people who have been there for since before the, Eurasian migration of the, Mongol people across the Bering Strait, as we theorize that the Native Americans came to the Americas, or whether they're people have been there for a few hundred years because they just wanted to escape whatever was happening in the country culturally. The other option that we touched on was caves. America and Canada have a vast network of caves. We have much of our bedrock is limestone. Limestone dissolves when it comes into contact with slightly acidic water. All rainwater is slightly acidic. It's not necessarily pollution. The carbon dioxide and carbon in the air binds to the rainwater, creating carbonic acid. It doesn't burn your skin, doesn't taste sour, but over time, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years, it dissolves channels through this limestone bedrock, and that's how most caves are formed. And we have and a vast network of caves, most of which are unexplored and unmapped, all across the country, and potentially leading to, you know, other countries. Um, and so that that network of caves we've talked about as perhaps being a shelter for cryptids, could easily shelter a fairly large amount of uh, feral people who, for whatever reason, decide that that's where they want to live and have made their home there. And there are animals that wander in and may never wander out. And then, of course, there's always the option of them coming out at night and foraging. Scavenging leftovers, hunting, animals or perhaps people. Um, and I think that is also quite a probable possibility. I am of the opinion myself that indeed there are certainly feral people in North America, and quite possibly, thriving communities of them. And that would speak to a fairly large population. Then we say, well, how does this connect to missing persons cases? Well, there's several reasons. It could be that these people, let's start with number one, don't want to be found.
Wow. Great stuff right there. Again, wouldn't expect anything less from you, which is why I bring you on to nerd out and try to figure out this stuff. Definitely bizarre. Last night on Camp Nightmare Fuel, we covered an episode involving some of the missing people and what exactly could be falling into line with this. And do you think some of these pale crawlers / skinwalkers could be one and the same, or do you potentially think this pale walker would be more of a Wendigo, or do you think again it could just be potentially albino humans?
Well, yeah. So now, now that my brain is working in this direction, I think it's possible. Like I said, kind of a evolutionary deviation from humanity, that these things that are seen, these pale crawlers, some of which are anywhere from like 7 to 9 feet tall, very gaunt, very skinny, large, dark eyes, and notably very white, pale skin. If you are living in a cave, you don't need protection from the sun. That could explain, their appearance, and then going back to the eyes, they have these large black eyes, typically in the descriptions. Well, like I said before, if you do end up leaving the cave and going out at night to forage and hunt and whatever, then large eyes are great for night vision, collecting whatever light there is from the moon and the stars and reflecting off the clouds and whatever, and making, them see far better than, a normal surface dwelling human would see at night. Um, and as far as, being skinny, to the point of looking emaciated, like skeletons with skin stretched over them, if you've ever, read about or watched any documentaries on some of these cave spelunkers, these people that like to explore caves, who I frankly think are crazy, they will worm through very tight passages so tight that they have to exhale most of the air from their lungs to wriggle through. Sounds mad to me. Well, if you live in an environment like that, where, maybe getting from point A to point B involves going through some pretty tight spaces, it would be beneficial to be long and skinny. Long because you can put your arm out, far ahead of you and pull yourself up, skinny to fit through the tight spaces. I mean, that's just as I've been considering this point, that maybe these things aren't actually, some sort of cryptid, although technically you could view it as a cryptid, but are a distant cousin of ours. That's one of the explanations I would have for the appearance that people describe when they see them. I want people to know that, I'm not saying it's all feral people. This is my new theory. No, I think there are a number of factors here, and I'm not saying there aren't, Bigfoot and Dogman and whatever else out there, occasionally snatching people. And I'm certainly not saying that, there aren't criminals in the woods. Like I've said before, I think that the most dangerous thing you're likely to meet in the woods is another person. And I'm not talking about the feral people. I'm talking about, just some, evil person from our world who feels like, hey, I'm in the woods 10, 20 miles away from the nearest city. I can do whatever I want.
Makes me wonder, when people report that it's so fast, they're only seeing it for short periods of time. I personally don't really think it's speed all the time. It's no different than a cheetah or an Olympic sprinter, right? When you first rip it for 20, 30 yards, yeah, you're cranking, man. What happens after that, right?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And that just, it's not the fault of the witnesses at all. I mean, it's a well-known fact that a witness testimony is pretty unreliable. You're in a stressful situation. You're not necessarily trained to be making observations. Your heart's pumping, your adrenaline's going. You're going to be assessing it after the fact, and your memory is not going to be perfect. And so I don't blame these people for thinking, yeah, that thing was as fast as a car. Well, if they're seeing it in the woods, have they ever seen a car go through the woods? I haven't, not necessarily. If it's there's not a road on the woods. With any and all of these sightings, whether we're talking these crawler things, the Dogman, Bigfoot, feral person, if it's weirding you out, if it's freaking you out, you're not in a calm state of mind to be making rational, reasonable observations. You don't have your notebook out, unless perhaps you're a trained observer like a police officer. They're trained to make observations in a very short amount of time with very limited data. Try to keep their head calm, in order to catch the license plate or the color of the jacket the guy was wearing or whatever, right? And so, but unfortunately, if police officers are seeing these things, not many are coming forward to talk about it, and for good reason. They're protecting their careers. I get it. As a guy with a business and a family, I understand the need to put your own personal well-being above science, for instance. But yeah, I think that a lot of these things could be, we've talked about it before. Unless you know for sure where whatever you're looking at's head was next to a tree that you can go back to, or a lamppost or whatever you can go back to, most people aren't very good at estimating height. It's true. I mean, funny story. I have a younger brother. I'm 6'4". He's like 5'8". He's adopted, and in his dating profile, he put that he was 6 feet tall, and he went on a lot of dates and never, ever, ever got called out about it by the girls he dated. My theory is they don't really know what 6 feet tall looks like. As long as he's
Yep.
taller than them, that's all that matters, And I think that's the way it is for a lot of people. So yeah, just a little funny story there.
No, brilliant stuff. As we are starting to tie this up, some analytics here as well. You have the majority of the sightings that would occur in summer. Again, 100% pie here, 44%. Okay, then the fall would be 22%. Spring and winter are at 17%. Now we're, again, another 100% pie here. 67% of these strange sightings are coming from civilians, 22% from law enforcement, 11% from military. That seems pretty reasonable.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that actually surprises me. That seems actually like a pretty good amount coming from military and law enforcement. But to me, I would place more credibility on both those types of witnesses, because they were trained how to deal with stress. They were trained how to make quick observations and remember small details. That's good. I like that.
Pretty gnarly stuff right there, my friend. So creepy. Well, brilliant stuff from you as always.
I mean, as always, these are just, I'm forming these theories and working through these ideas in real time here. It's I'm not right. I'm not all knowing. And my thoughts and opinions change pretty rapidly. So if my thoughts don't align with you, dear listener, don't you worry. At some point, we'll probably reach an agreement. And I'm not saying I'm right. I never am. So, but yeah, be safe out there. And remember, the scariest thing you're probably going to run into in the woods or the mountains is another person.
Ooh, my creatures of the night. I do adore every single one of you legends. Please like, comment, subscribe, share the truth to the algorithm. And remember, there are things that go bump in the night.